Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Top diplomats of South Korea and the United States are set to meet in Washington soon, amid renewed concerns over the Trump administration's tariff hike threats. This will be their first meeting since the two countries released a joint summit fact sheet in November. South Korea's consumer prices in January marked the smallest on-year increase in 5 months, by rising 2% from the same month a year earlier. The United States and Iran are set to resume nuclear talks this week in Istanbul. This comes as U.S. President Donald Trump insists the only way to avoid military conflict is a swift deal, while Iran's top diplomat also says the government is reviewing the terms for restarting negotiations. We begin this morning with bilateral talks between South Korea and the United States. Amid mounting concerns over the Trump administration's tariff policy towards South Korea, Seoul's top diplomat is to hold talks with his U.S. counterpart this week. Our Kim Bo-kyung starts us off.
South Korea's top diplomat Cho Hyun is slated to have talks with his U.S. counterpart, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday local time. The meeting will be on the sidelines of Wednesday's U.S.-hosted ministerial meeting on critical minerals. According to Seoul's foreign ministry, this is their first in-person meeting since South Korea and the U.S. released a joint summit fact sheet on November 14th. The two sides plan to hold comprehensive discussions on how to speed up the implementation of follow-up measures to the joint fact sheet, such as nuclear-powered submarines and the expansion of South Korea's authority over uranium enrichment and spent nuclear fuel reprocessing. The two could also discuss President Donald Trump's recent tariff hike threat from 15% to 25%. Meanwhile, Trump announced through his social media platform Truth Social on Monday that the U.S. would lower the reciprocal tariff on India from 25% to 18%. This following his phone talks with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, where India agreed to stop buying Russian oil as requested by the U.S. to cut off Russia's war financing. Saying that India decided to buy much more oil from the U.S. and potentially from Venezuela, Trump stated that trade deal of lowering tariffs to 18% will take effect immediately. With the additional 25% tariff penalty that was imposed due to India's imports of Russian oil also removed, the overall tariff on Indian exports to the U.S. will sharply go down from 50% to 18%. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
At a New Year's press conference, Prime Minister Kim Min-seok dismissed arguments that U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff threat last week was triggered by South Korea's investigation into e-commerce company Coupang. Our correspondent Song Yu-jin reports.
Prime Minister Kim Min-seok says the claims linking U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff threats for South Korea to Seoul's probe into the U.S.-based e-commerce giant Coupang are, quote, completely unfounded.
Some media outlets have suggested that Vice President Vance has strongly warned or pressured South Korea over the Coupang investigation, portraying it as Washington's primary concern. That may reflect Coupang's own position, but it does not align with the confirmed stance of the U.S. government.
Speaking at his New Year's press conference on Monday, the Prime Minister said President Trump's social media post announcing a tariff increase on most South Korean goods from the negotiated 15% to 25% was instead tied to Washington's request for faster implementation of the agreement reached during tariff negotiations. He appeared to be referring to the Special Act on the Management of Strategic Investment between South Korea and the United States, submitted to the National Assembly last year, which provides the legal basis to manage Seoul's $350 billion investment pledge to the U.S. in exchange for lower tariffs. The bill is currently pending review by the relevant standing committee before it can be put to a vote. Kim said this understanding of Washington's position was confirmed through multiple communication channels, including his newly established hotline with Vice President J.D. Vance.
We exchanged direct contact information right there and then, including that of Vice President Vance and White House Deputy National Security Advisor Andy Baker. We've already been in frequent communication.
Regarding South Korea's ongoing investigation into Coupang's massive data breach, Kim reaffirmed that while legal issues would be handled strictly in accordance with the law, Seoul and Washington have agreed to maintain close communication to prevent this from escalating into unnecessary trade friction or misunderstandings. This follows growing scrutiny in the U.S., where some have raised concerns that the investigation may be overly stringent because Coupang is a U.S.-based company. 송유진, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korea's consumer prices increased at the slowest pace in 5 months in January, extending an inflation cooling trend for the second straight month. According to data released Tuesday by the Ministry of Data and Statistics, consumer prices were up 2.0% from a year earlier. The pace of increase slowed by 0.3 percentage points from December. Petroleum product prices showed no change from the same period last year, helping to ease overall inflation pressures. By contrast, prices of agricultural, livestock, and fishery products climbed 2.6%, with rice and apples among the items posting notable gains. More and more fans of Korean culture from overseas are buying Korean products directly online. And now, for a few years in a row, these numbers have been growing, while in 2025, there was an even bigger jump. Our Kim Do-yeon explains more.
Overseas demand for Korean products continues to rise with the help of an expanding attraction to Korean culture. According to the Ministry of Data and Statistics on Monday, reverse direct overseas sales, domestic companies selling directly to foreign consumers online, reached 3.02 trillion won, or around $2.1 billion in 2025. This represents a 16.4% increase from the previous year and marks 3 straight years of growth. By product, the demand for K-food has driven unprecedented growth. Online exports of food and beverages skyrocketed 49.2% year-on-year, reaching a record 112.9 billion won. To put this in perspective, sales stood at just 46.5 billion won in 2023. They jumped to 75.7 billion in 2024 and surged past the 100 billion mark in 2025. Cosmetics sales also rose by 20.4%, while clothing and fashion-related items posted a decline. Regarding imports or overseas direct purchases, the market grew by 5.2% to approximately 8.5 trillion won. China accounted for the largest share of this market. Purchases from China increased by roughly 15%, capturing 65.5% of total overseas direct purchases. This is attributed to the increased use of large Chinese platforms like AliExpress and Temu. In contrast, direct purchases from the United States decreased by 17.6%. The overall domestic online shopping market also grew, reaching a total transaction volume of 272 trillion won last year. However, the growth rate was 4.9%, the lowest growth since 2017. Data officials addressed questions regarding the impact of the Coupang incident and data breaches late last year. The ministry stated that whether these issues affected the total figures was not clarified, as specific transaction numbers for individual companies are not disclosed under statistical protocols. However, they noted that the overall market trend remains stable without unusual fluctuations. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Netflix animated hit K-pop Demon Hunters has made history again after the hit song Golden won Best Song Written for Visual Media at the Grammy Awards, giving K-pop its first Grammy win ever. For more on this, we're joined today by Matthew Berbiger, visiting assistant professor of Korean Studies at Carnegie Mellon University. Professor Berbiger, thanks for joining us today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So Golden has become the first ever K-pop song to win a Grammy Award, but K-pop hasn't had a lot of representation at the Grammys in the past, right? So how significant is this win, and what does it mean for the K-pop industry as a whole?
So yes, as you said very well, there hasn't been a lot of representation in the Grammys so far. And it was because the panel of voters, and the people who were choosing the nominees, they were not representative of how various the audience has become and how it has changed over the years. And Grammys is still a very US-centered ceremony. And the US still had the monopoly in terms of popular music. So it was very hard until now. So that's why this first Grammy Awards for Golden is very symbolic. And I think it's even more a symbol because this is the best song written for visual media. So it is celebrating actually the work of the K-pop producers who are behind all K-pop songs and songs like Golden. So I think it's a celebration of their hard work and how they have strived in the industry.
Right, and since it came out last June, this movie, K-pop Demon Hunters, has become Netflix's most viewed movie of all time. It keeps hitting new milestones. Why do you think this film connected so strongly with audiences around the world, and how has that success helped spread interest in Korean culture overseas?
Yeah, so I think there are three main elements that are very important to take into account. First, the fact that it was distributed on a big platform like Netflix. It kind of goes, in this logic that is going on right now as Netflix is distributing a lot of K-dramas and a lot of people are more and more interested in Korean content. And the fact also that it was an animation movie marketing for a younger audience, it helped attract an even more broader spectrum of audience that can enjoy Korean content. And finally, the fact that there's so many elements related to Korea in the movies, they're eating kimbap and ramyeon. They are showing all those scenic places in Seoul. So of course, I envision that it creates a generation of younger kids who will have like a positive understanding of Korean culture and maybe the curiosity to get to know more about it.
I see. And how big is the K-pop market globally right now, and how is its popularity spilling over into other areas of Korean culture?
I would say that right now, it's more like a turning point. K-pop is really no longer this kind of subculture or niche, that no one have heard nothing about. Now it's really, I was talking about hegemony of the US in terms of popular music. I actually think that K-pop is kind of trying to compete with that. And it's now, in nowadays, if you don't know about K-pop, you almost seem like the person who is a little bit outsider, who is not very up with the trends.
Right.
So I think it definitely contributes to interest. And, where I teach, I see a lot of students who are interested first in K-pop, and then they take maybe their first Korean class or they take a Korean society class. So it's really a very good element for them to get into other elements of Korean culture, might that be history or even society. And I'm also an example as someone who started learning Korean because I was a K-pop fan. So very happy to see that more extended.
I see. And Korean culture has been gaining global attention for quite some time, so it's nothing new. What do you think is keeping that momentum going, and how does South Korea become such a cultural powerhouse, and what do you think is next?
Yes, so as you said it very well, it's nothing new. And still, sometimes we keep saying this is a new phenomenon or this is still growing. And we tend to talk about K-pop in the Korean wave as a wave, right? So, but the wave has been keeping for so long, and this is not going to end anytime soon, I think. And I think it helps kind of coming back to the first question that I was mentioning, the fact that, the creativity of all the people, not only the artists, of course, but also all the people behind, the producers, the choreographers, the people making the music video, all the staff, and all this kind of creative energy is really showing also how fast K-pop is to adapt to several trends and shows how the world is changing. And so K-pop, is an international phenomenon by essence. And it takes influence from so many cultures, not only, of course, Korea, but I think the Korean content is able to give the kind of own understanding of globalization through the content that they are distributing worldwide. And for what's next, I'm not a very big fan of projections, but I would like to give some kind of hopeful projection, which is I hope it will make people understand, how important it is to open to other cultures and learn about them, learn about other languages. And I feel like that bridge that Korean content and like K-pop as an example is building throughout the years. It's definitely helping, and I don't see that going out for anytime soon. So I'm very hopeful for the next years and see maybe more Grammys for the next years.
Right, that's good to hear. All right, thank you so much for your insight and time this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
The United States and Iran are set to resume nuclear talks in Turkey this Friday, raising cautious hopes for renewed diplomacy as both sides try to curb tensions and avoid a wider conflict. This will be the first meeting between the two countries' officials since the collapse of the negotiations and the 12-day war last June. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
The United States and Iran are set to resume nuclear talks on Friday in Istanbul. According to Iranian and U.S. officials who spoke to Reuters, the renewed diplomacy comes amid efforts to ease tensions over Iran's nuclear program and to prevent the risk of a broader regional conflict. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi are expected to meet, while representatives from several Middle Eastern countries, including Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Egypt, are also expected to be in attendance. The talks signal a possible reopening of dialogue after months of heightened rhetoric and stalled negotiations. Both Washington and Tehran have recently indicated a willingness to return to diplomacy, even as differences remain over the scope of Iran's nuclear activities. The talks come after U.S. President Donald Trump on Sunday played down recent warnings from Iran's supreme leader about the possibility of a regional war.
Why wouldn't he say that? Of course you're going to say that, but we have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
Trump added that the U.S. has a strong military presence nearby and voiced hope that a deal could still be reached, stressing that the outcome would ultimately test those warnings. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson Ismail Baghaei said Monday that Tehran is currently reviewing the terms for restarting negotiations. His comments suggest Iran is open to talks, but cautious about the conditions attached.
Various points have been exchanged. At this stage, we are reviewing and deciding on the details of any diplomatic process, which we hope will reach a conclusion in the coming days.
According to Iranian sources cited by Reuters, Washington has proposed three main conditions for resuming negotiations: zero uranium enrichment in Iran, limits on Iran's ballistic missile program, and an end to its support for regional proxy groups. Iran has long rejected these demands, calling them violations of its sovereignty. However, two Iranian officials told Reuters that internally, Tehran may see restrictions on its missile program as a bigger sticking point than limits on uranium enrichment. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Moscow says it will consider South Korea's stance on Ukraine when shaping future bilateral ties. In a statement on Monday, Russia's foreign ministry said relations with Seoul will be guided by Russia's national interest, highlighting South Korea's participation in sanctions against Russia and whether it supplies lethal weapons to Kyiv. It noted the Lee Jae-myung administration's willingness to improve dialogue and economic ties, but said real progress depends on external conditions, including the Ukraine situation. Moscow added that both sides are conveying their positions through diplomatic channels, including a meeting between the two foreign ministers at last September's UN General Assembly.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. The Trump administration is facing another major legal hurdle as civil rights groups move to block a sweeping immigration freeze with a lawsuit claiming the government is illegally dismantling decades of established law. A group of civil rights organizations, including the National Immigration Law Center and Legal Aid Society, sued the U.S. State Department in federal court in Manhattan on Monday. The groups want to block a policy that suspended immigrant visas for citizens from 75 countries on January 21st, arguing it undermines long-standing immigration law and is based on what it calls a false claim that nationals from those countries are likely to become public charges by relying on welfare. Plaintiffs say the pause has already separated families and blocked high-skilled professionals, while the State Department argues it's needed to safeguard resources and improve security. Britain's former U.S. Ambassador Peter Mandelson resigned from the Labour Party late Sunday after newly released files appear to show potentially criminal connection between him and Jeffrey Epstein. Newly released U.S. Justice Department files suggest Mandelson leaked a confidential government briefing on economic policy to the late sex offender. The documents also indicate Mandelson received donation payments totaling up to $75,000 from Epstein, but he denies any recollection of the money. Prime Minister Keir Starmer on Monday called for Mandelson's removal from the House of Lords and ordered a full cabinet review of the security breach. British police are now reviewing the matter to determine if criminal charges are warranted. Elon Musk is consolidating his empire into what investors are calling the Musktonomy. The Tesla CEO announced on Monday that SpaceX has acquired his artificial intelligence startup XAI. The deal combines the rocket manufacturer with the maker of the Grok chatbot to create a tech giant valued at $1.25 trillion. By making XAI a wholly owned subsidiary, Musk aims to use AI to scale SpaceX's mission towards interstellar exploration. The merger arrives just as SpaceX prepares for a massive public offering later this year. At the Grammy Awards in Los Angeles, Bad Bunny won Album of the Year, marking the first time a Spanish-language album won the event's top prize. Bad Bunny won the award for his album Debí Tirar Más Fotos. During his acceptance speech, he dedicated the win to people who leave their homeland to follow their dreams, and he also criticized U.S. immigration and customs enforcement.
Hope your morning commute was a smooth one. Many roads and sidewalks were covered with black ice from yesterday's snow. After a freezing start, temperatures will rise significantly during the day and stay on the warmer side. But on Friday, cold air will return, dropping down the morning lows to -9 degrees Celsius again here in Seoul. Meanwhile, eastern regions remain very dry. Strong winds will increase the risk of wildfires. Please be cautious to ensure fire safety. And this afternoon will be 1 to 7 degrees Celsius higher than yesterday. Seoul will be getting up to a much welcome 5 degrees Celsius. Daegu, Gyeongju, Busan will be all getting up to 9 degrees under mostly sunny skies in many places. While a severe cold snap is expected this weekend, a winter mix is in the forecast in parts of Jeollado and Jeju Island at the end of the week. But for today, please drive slowly and walk carefully even if the roads look clear.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.